Violence continues in and around the Kabul airport, including 5 incoming rockets that were shot down by that aforementioned C-RAM system. Congressman Dan Bishop of North Carolina joins us now. Congressman, welcome. It's good to have you. I know you and other lawmakers have been incredibly busy trying to aid whether it's American citizens or whether it's allies, Afghan assets who provided information or translated and helped our efforts there in Afghanistan. I know that you've all been busy trying to evacuate. We heard from CENTCOM just a bit ago that all of the evacuation, all of that's all wrapped up, but we still don't have a number on how many people are left there. So I know it's a brand new week, so has Congress been informed as to how many Americans or Afghan allies are still left in Kabul or Afghanistan?
Certainly not this member of Congress, Dana. It's been chaos for the duration, and it hasn't improved at this point. Obviously, I recognize that the administration has its hands full. So I don't, we've been asking questions all along. We've gotten a briefing, a week ago. It was not very fulsome. We don't have current information in Congress, and I'm waiting with bated breath to find out whether we've got everybody out.
Wow. A lot of questions, obviously, about the evacuation. I think what they said earlier today, there were 3 C-17 planes. It's still nighttime in Kabul time, but that they were firing rockets at departing planes and even at our troops. I mean, we keep hearing that we're prepared for every contingency, but it doesn't sound like it, and I don't think you've seen evidence that we were.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it's been catastrophically bad decision-making all along, inexplicably bad. And I think the first issue that resides in the minds of most people who've watched this is, why did we give up Bagram Air Base? And the best suggestion that's been provided, or the hints, are that there were specific numbers of troops that they wanted to have as they reduced the footprint, and all they could hold was Kabul International Airport. And but that's just inexplicable decision making. Why is there $85 billion of equipment remaining behind? Why were apparently lists provided of personnel who were seeking to get out? Why? It just has not, it's an absolute disaster.
You bring up a really good point. I want to go to those lists here in a moment, but I mean, Bagram's what, about a 50-minute drive outside of Kabul, pretty isolated, not in the middle of a major city there in Afghanistan, where you have ISIS-K peppered throughout the surrounding population. It just seems like that would be the worst case scenario to try to make your final stand as you're evacuating thousands of people out of a country that is now being overrun by terrorists that we were shooting at just 2 weeks prior. That doesn't, and it also sounds too, Congressman, that some of the military leadership and State Department and Jen Psaki and even Biden, some of his remarks didn't really seem to line up with General Milley's on why they decided to abandon not just Bagram, but also all of our equipment there. They said they demilitarized it. Doesn't really look like that when we see video Taliban taking out these Blackhawks, does it?
No, it doesn't, Dana. And I think there are many questions to be asked. Congress should be in Washington conducting oversight to try to get answers. And even if not, we're not ready for oversight hearings and so forth, there ought to be regular and extensive briefings where members of Congress can ask these questions for details, not merely get a handful of questions before they cut off. That's what happened a week ago. We've gotten no further information, but there are many things like that just the answers do not add up. There have been conflicts in the information, contradictions in the information provided by the president versus the Secretary of Defense and so forth. And it's hard to overstate how badly this has been handled, but that is the reaction internationally. It's the reaction, obviously, polling indicates American people are disheartened about how this has been done. And then, of course, most horrific of all, the loss of 13 American service members, and we posted on my Twitter account a picture that had been provided to us of members of the military standing out exposed at Hamid Karzai International Airport outside a gate. And to your point, Dana, Bagram would have been far more defensible, and it would have been far more viable for the management of the evacuations that need be. It certainly would have provided a couple of outlets. And I can't see any good reason for having abandoned that other than trying to reach some specific number of troops and General Milley's view that we could only hold one facility.
When you heard some of the remarks, Congressman, talking to Congressman Dan Bishop from North Carolina, when you heard some of the remarks from Ned Price, Jake Sullivan, and even General Milley about who we were getting intel from and who we were sharing intel with, did it surprise you? Was that the first that you had heard that we were working with the Taliban to that extent?
Oh, absolutely. And I mentioned earlier the provision of the names of individuals, but I also understood comments that they have control, that they could take our aircraft out as we enter and leave the airspace. I just don't, it doesn't add up that there was the need to have to collapse in the way that the administration chose to collapse. And it's going to have ramifications and ripples in global affairs for years to come.
Yeah. I wanted to get your reaction to earlier Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying that the U.S. wasn't providing Taliban with lists, but rather just manifests. Which is, pretty much the same thing. It wasn't lists; he was using lists. Do you buy that defense from Secretary Blinken?
We really ought to be beyond semantics at this point. And if in fact it turns out to be a story that's not correct, then let's get the details out. Let's get in Congress in a classified briefing, and let's ask those questions so that we can nail down whether we're talking about semantic differences or whether the entire information, the reporting is inaccurate, which happens from time to time. But at this point, I'm not persuaded that they've answered clearly.
How many briefings has Congress had at this point, Congressman? I know that Nancy Pelosi was reluctant to call everyone back for anything other than getting more money in a budget, but has she scheduled? Have there been any briefings established by leadership? Or I'm curious. Let everybody know, because it seems as though you all are fighting for answers just as the rest of us are.
Well, I think we have the responsibility to the American people to be engaged and to learn from the administration what they're doing as it's happening. The only briefing that has been available to me was one that occurred, and I think it's Tuesday of last week. Remember, Nancy Pelosi called us back during August recess, not because of the collapsing situation in Afghanistan, but in order to pass the $3.5 trillion reckless spending reconciliation budget resolution as a first step, probably end up spending the $1.2 trillion on top of that, the bipartisan, quote, infrastructure bill. But that was why we were called back to Washington. In the morning after we came back on Monday, last Monday, there was a briefing. It was perfunctory. It was not very detailed. Questions were not really, not very many questions were entertained, and that's been it. So perhaps the senior membership, the leadership has received more information. I haven't really gotten that impression either. We've had a conference call with Republicans and our leadership, and we didn't hear anything to that effect. That was a number of days ago now. So no, I very much believe that we should be in Washington, that we should be monitoring this, and that the administration should be not. It's not something that has to happen constantly, but we should be able to communicate with the administration and get their answers on behalf of the American people.
Yes, and one of those questions, talking with Congressman Dan Bishop, is the refugees that are being relocated. And we know a number of them are those allies that we work with who actually protected the lives of our troops overseas, those translators, those informants. But then there are also large numbers of people that we don't know. We don't have any way of verifying their background, their identity. A lot of males coming over. Is there anything that can be done congressionally to establish, something or to where we can maybe vet some of these people before we're just allowing everyone to disperse throughout the country during a pandemic?
Well, it's among the subject matters that many of us want to ask about. I'm very concerned about that. I don't think that I think we need to exercise considerable caution and restraint. Of course, as you know, Dana, we also have, by action by the Biden administration's reckless management, we have an apparently wide open southwestern border. And so when you take that picture combined with what's happening in Afghanistan, combined with the question of who exactly is coming into the United States as applicants for the SIV status, special visa status, all of these things are grave risks to the American people. The possibility of a future 9/11, those are grave concerns. And again, something we're not able to really explore as Republican members, at least in the minority. The majority decides. And I know Kevin McCarthy believes we need to be back in Washington. He said so. He's asked Speaker Pelosi to bring us back for exactly these reasons. It's just when we're present there, we can push on the machinery more effectively, and she's just not inclined to do it.
So really nothing, Congress is basically thwarted from acting on any of this at all because you have the Speaker of the House that refuses to bring everybody back in session.
That's the essence of it. We've been reduced to, applying all of our efforts to pass messages into the administration to try to facilitate Americans and American allies getting out of the country. We've had my offices handled a number of those requests.
And you're doing that as opposed to the State Department that ran the whole operation.
Well, it does. The State Department's more often been, according to our experience and that of many others I've talked to, many other members, has been more of an obstacle, in fact, a stunning obstacle at points, to rather than a facilitator. So I'm giving all credit for the fact that there's a great deal of disorder and chaos and much to do, and the administration imposed this self-imposed deadline. But many of us have been just doing everything we can to get some names, one by one, trying to get them out of the country.
We do appreciate you doing that as well. Congressman Dan Bishop from North Carolina. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully Congress can get together and convene, and Nancy Pelosi can bring everybody back and see that it's in the nation's best interest with all of this to do so. Thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate you.